Inshallah, we are waiting to go live on the live streaming, and inshallah, we'll start immediately. So this is how you look on the live streaming. So as long as you are here, or you go there, if you come here, you will not be.
Oh, okay. I can move over.
That's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair for staying back to be part of this important presentation. My name is Dr. Uzma Iqbal, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Cyrus Iqbal, who is an oncologist in training, and inshallah will be finishing in the next 6 months. And his wife is here also, Dr. Hina Ahmed. She's an anesthesiologist and pain management physician. So it's very important for us to discuss the health and fitness so that as ummah and as individuals, we can reap the maximum benefit of all the benefits that Allah has bestowed upon us. So Cyrus has a personal interest in not only just the exercise part of it and the dieting part of it, rather understanding what health actually is and how weight is gained and how weight can be managed. So with Allah's permission and his blessings, we would like to hand it over to Cyrus so he can, inshallah, give us this presentation.
Thanks. So, assalamu alaikum, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Does this sound right? Okay, very good. So, again, thank you for staying back, and thanks, Samma, for the introduction. So, again, my name is Cyrus Iqbal, and the talk tonight is going to be called The Strong Believer, Islam and Fitness. It's part 1, and inshallah I'll explain the outline of this talk as well as what's to come next. So first, an overview. I'll introduce myself a little bit further and talk about my personal journey through fitness and health and how I came to understand it in the way that I do now. I'll then provide a rationale or a motivation, both from a statistical basis and from an Islamic basis, as to why we should care and actively strive towards health and fitness, even more than we already do. After that, I'll introduce the 6 rules, which is a concept that I've come up with to simplify and streamline the way that we can think about health and fitness and make it accessible while at the same time being science-based. Then we'll conclude with closing remarks and questions and feedback. So first, we'll start with my personal story. On the left was me 5 years ago. I was in my first year of internal medicine residency, so that was right after graduating from medical school. As you can see, I did not look very happy. I was actually just after an injury. I had hurt my right knee playing basketball. I tore my ACL and meniscus. At the time, I was pretty active. I would play basketball, play other sports pretty regularly, but I didn't quite understand the importance of nutrition, the importance of recovery, exercise, and how to manage those things to prevent injury and to really be fit and healthy, not just active in a casual sense. So unfortunately, I got injured, and as you can see there, that was me maybe 30 minutes before my surgery. After the surgery, with the recovery and the limitations in physical activity, as well as the demands of medical training, I wasn't able to exercise all that consistently, and unfortunately I gained weight. I had gained about 25 pounds from that picture until about 2 years ago, and I was out of shape and wasn't really able to be as active even as I was at that point in time. So as you see in the second image there, I had gone back to my biochemistry book. I had thrown it somewhere far away because I thought after medical school I would never need it again. But I opened it back up and I started to read about what really underlies nutrition, where the science can meet the practical application of diet and exercise, and whether there'd be anything that I could apply to my own life. Reason being, I had tried a lot of the same things that my friends have tried and my family have tried, and unfortunately it wasn't quite working for me. I would count calories, I would use all of the apps and Apple Watches and things out there, and unfortunately I just couldn't lose the weight with my busy schedule and with the methods that I was trying. So I dove back into my biochemistry textbook, and what I found was absolutely fascinating. I was able to apply it to my diet and come up with the rules that I said I would share with everybody in a moment. And alhamdulillah, as I'll show you in the next slide, it really worked for me, and it made something that seemed very complex actually very simple, because all I was doing was following the rules of science, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made our bodies work. So that, is the middle picture, and then to the right you can see a book called Advances in Nutrition and Cancer. So I did something I thought I was also never going to do again. I actually went to a library and physically checked out a book, which I didn't even know how to do. I had to look it up online to see how to actually check out a book. But I went ahead and did so, and I read this book. Now, as my mom mentioned, I'm training in oncology. I'm 6 months from the end of my training, and what I found was fascinating. There are so many types of cancer, prostate, colon, breast, you name it, that are linked to our nutrition and to our metabolic health. We think of things like smoking or even family history as being linked to cancer, and that's correct. But what I found was shocking, to put it bluntly, in terms of how our health and nutrition directly plays a role in our risk of cancer. And unfortunately, as I'll get to later in the talk, I have plenty of younger patients who are hardly older than me who are coming in, believe it or not, with cancer diagnoses, especially colon and rectal cancer. So along the way, along my journey, as you can see through these images, it dawned on me that health and fitness aren't just hobbies, or they're not just things to think about when you have time. These are things that you really need to prioritize and approach systematically to prevent illness, to enhance our quality of life, and to be there for the people who need us. That could be our spouses, our children, etc. So, of course, who am I? Alhamdulillah, I'm a Muslim, and as we've mentioned, I'm a physician. I completed my board certification in internal medicine in 2021, so 3 years ago, and now I'm in my final year of hematology and oncology fellowship. I'm also, just like everybody else here, just trying to stay healthy and facing the same challenges that everybody here is facing, with a busy schedule, with obligations, beyond just work or even family life. So this first image that you can see on the right, that was me almost 2 years ago to the day. If you look, the weight is 193.4. There's a big red square next to it. That's bad. That means that my weight was way too high. And my BMI was 29.3. 30 is the cutoff, as I'll get to, for obesity. So I was quite literally just about to be obese. As you can see, my body fat was close to 30%, which for men, the acceptable range is about 15 to 20%. That's where you should be, sort of, at least. And as you can see here, the visceral fat level was quite high. I think you can see the planar here was at 12, and my subcutaneous fat, which I can get to in a moment, was also very high. So this was me about 2 weeks ago. So alhamdulillah, by applying the principles that I had just mentioned, I've been able to lose over 40 pounds. I've been able to nearly cut my body fat in half And on the other scale that I have, it is actually half, it's 14%. And as you can see, the subcutaneous and the visceral fat are also far less. So alhamdulillah, that's for me, that's the before and after picture. I think with a lot of fitness content, you'll see people with a six-pack, and before that, they didn't look that way. To me, I don't think any of us really need to worry or think about that. I think our health and our nutrition at a chemical and physiological level is what we should be aiming for. And alhamdulillah, this sort of before and after is the thing that I'm the most proud of and happy with. And that's what I want to share with everybody here. So, like I said, next we'll talk about why we should care about this. First, a statistical, data-based rationale. So, and there's a quiz, as you can see on the bottom, so I'm going to call on people, so everyone get ready, please pay attention. So, 75% of adults in the US are overweight according to the BMI cutoff of 25 to 30. BMI, if you're not familiar, is basically how heavy you are relative to your height. So, of course, somebody who weighs as much as me, who is a foot taller than me, would have a lower BMI because they're a lot taller and they're expected to be a little bit heavier. You could think of it that way. Obesity is defined as a BMI of over 30, and as I showed you in the last slide, I was dangerously close to that number. So 75% of adults in the US fit these categories. And that means that basically 3 out of every 4 people you see at HEB or out in, the airport or at work are actually overweight or obese. Also, more than 10%, so greater than 1 in 10 adults in the United States have type 2 diabetes. That puts you at risk independently for cancer, heart attacks, strokes, dementia, and other physical disabilities. And it actually might be higher than the 10% in South Asian, Desi, and Arab communities because our populations are a little underrepresented in the medical literature. And we may have genetic predispositions that other people might not. So we need to be extra careful about this. And so, like I said earlier, by applying these principles, we can actually prevent disease, prolong life, and improve the quality of our lives, inshallah, if Allah permits. And so, as I mentioned, there's a quiz, but don't worry, it's very easy. It's just yes or no questions. So the first question is, can somebody be diabetic even at a normal weight? Yeah, very good, yes. So that's exactly right, and I'll get to why that matters in a moment. Second is, are these BMI cutoffs that I mentioned, the 25 for overweight, 30 for obesity, are they the same for everyone? No. Okay, very good. So there's actually emerging literature and emerging data that for Asian, South Asian populations, we, because of our increased risk, because of how much more likely we are to get diabetes, should be targeting a BMI of less than 23. That hasn't been adopted sort of officially, to put it that way, but BMI cutoffs, it's increasingly clear that this one-size-fits-all number isn't actually that way, and that we all need to individualize our risk and consider things like family history, body composition, and things like that. So, as everybody said, BMI cutoffs, they're not the same for all of us. And then, more importantly, this is the Islamic rationale, and this was what I found so fascinating and why I wanted to do this talk in the first place. So, as we all know, Islam is a comprehensive way of life. It's not just what we do when we, pray or fast or come, for Jummah. It's how we talk to our parents and our spouses. It's how we conduct ourselves in the workplace. It's being honest even when you don't necessarily have to be. It's a comprehensive way of life, and fitness and being in good shape is actually sunnah. And there are plenty of hadith about physical activity and eating in moderation. I only included a few of them for the sake of time, but I'll go over a couple of them just now. So the first one, Aisha radiallahu anha stated that I raced with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and I beat him. So she beat him in a race. And then she says later, when I had put on some weight, we raced again and he won. Then he said, this cancels that, referring to the previous race. So the Prophet ﷺ was definitely interested in engaging in physical activity. And in the following hadith, you can see here, it says very clearly, teach your children swimming, archery, and horse riding. those are physical activities. It's very clear that the Prophet ﷺ is giving explicit guidance that we should be passing on an ethos of being physically active, that's part of the sunnah and that was part of his way of life. Eating in moderation is also very central to how the Prophet ﷺ lived his life. This hadith, this third one here, says that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, "A human being fills no worse vessel than his stomach. It is sufficient for a human being to eat a few mouthfuls to keep his spine straight." So if you think about it, what he's saying is that you just need to eat enough to be able to stand straight. You don't need to overeat and do what probably all of us at some point have done, where you eat so much you can't even stand up, you want to sit down or lay down all day. And the hadith goes on to say, but if he must fill it, his stomach, then fill it with 1/3 food, 1/3 drink, and then 1/3 air, meaning don't fill yourself up. And as I'll go over in a minute, that's exactly in line with the science. We don't need to eat until we're completely full. We should be considering how we can limit or restrict what we eat to very reasonably sized portions. The Prophet ﷺ was spot on both in terms of virtuous lifestyle as well as just with the science, which came literally 1,000 and some years later. There's another hadith, the last one here, where it is reported that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, "The food of one person suffices for two, the food of two persons suffices for four, and the food of four suffices for 8." So again, just another point that shows that what you think is good enough for just you to eat, it's actually for 2 people, and so on and so forth. Another nice thing about this is if someone next to you is eating something and you want a bite of it, you can tell him, actually this is for 2, so I need to have some of it also. Yeah, maybe just it depends on the person, I guess. So actually, before I go on, just to make it interactive, does anybody else know, for my learning too, any hadith or acts in the sunnah that are related to this? Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Yeah. It's a great point. Yeah, actually, my wife has done archery too. And if you pull the bow back, like the actual bow, it takes a lot of force. And the muscles that you use are your lats and your pecs to pull the bow back. So if you're really practicing archery with like an unassisted bow, it takes a lot of force as well as core strength to be accurate with the bow. So it's not an easy thing to do. It's not just a question of skill with aiming. Especially back then, you needed to be really strong to handle the bow, to be on a horse, to aim, etc. So it wasn't as easy as maybe like throwing a ball, or I don't know, like using a pointer might be. It was very physically engaged. And that's a good point that you made. Oh, they sure do. Yeah, that's exactly right. It- that's very true. It's very true. Yeah, exactly. I'll repeat that for the stream, I guess. So what this brother was saying was very spot on. He was saying that it's partially about being healthy and fit. It's also partially about being able to, for the community, stand up to whatever the needs of the community are. It could be a direct threat from a physical threat. It could be that, a storm has taken place and you need to rebuild things or put things back together. But if we were all fitter or healthier, we would be able to come to each other's service, as you said, a lot more easily. And you would gain some of the confidence and the sense of meaning that comes with being able to do those things. Even if, inshallah, we never want for there to be a storm or a threat, but you do feel a peace of mind knowing that I can handle, certain things that may come up. Yeah, that's a great question. So rule number 3 of 6 is going to address exactly that point. And inshallah, subsequent parts of this lecture and my upcoming lectures are also going to go a deep dive into exactly how fasting works. But that's, you're thinking exactly along the right lines there. Yeah. Well, great. Thanks. Thanks for the participation. Oh, sure. Go ahead. I didn't quite hear the question. Was it? Yeah. So rule number 1 of 6 is going to address that exact point. So great question. So both of you guys predicted 1/3 of the talk already between the two of you. So maybe this whole group, you guys can come and we'll trade. But you're exactly right. Yeah. Rules number 1 and 3 are going to go into exactly those points. So very good. All right. So now that we're talking about the rules, I have 6 rules that I came up with, like I mentioned, from reviewing the biochemistry, from reviewing literature across subspecialties, not just in oncology, but in cardiology, as well as in kinesiology and exercise science. And so I condensed them and made them into these 6 rules because obviously there's no textbook that tells you, oh yeah, these are the 6 rules, just follow this and you'll be fine. I had to kind of synthesize them, and it's kind of what I wish I had in the beginning when I was almost obese. If I had them from the very start, it would have made it a lot easier, but inshallah, for anyone who is now interested in improving their health, it'll make it easier for you. It's also aimed at fat loss, not only weight loss. So obviously when you lose fat, you will lose weight, but there is a big difference between the two. And one of my friends, when I was talking to him about this, gave me the example of, what if I ate only 500 calories a day of ice cream? Wouldn't I lose weight? And technically, yeah, you would lose weight, but you would lose muscle, you would gain fat, and you would be even unhealthier than when you started in the first place. And so the 6 rules help you navigate the subtle but very important difference between weight loss and fat loss. Because what probably most of us want is fat loss, not just decreasing an arbitrary number on the scale. The 6 rules also allowed me not to have to follow a strict plan. So like I said, for basically 4 years after my injury, I couldn't do it. I wasn't able to lose weight or lose fat. I was actually gaining weight. And part of the problem was that all the advice out there is very limiting. It's very strict. And it doesn't account for situations that I experience in my day-to-day life, like going to a shadi or a wedding, or going to a restaurant, or being invited over to a friend's house where, they give you 4, 5, 6, courses after dinner, and it's rude to say no. What do you do? No one out there is talking about this. But these rules will help you navigate those really tricky situations. I also reflected on talking to patients and some of the struggles they deal with, because obviously I'm not the only person who's trying to do this. Probably like 3/4 of the population, as I showed you, is probably thinking about their weight in some way. And so in talking to patients and seeing what they deal with, I was able to kind of extrapolate that and share it here tonight. And I was also motivated, like I said earlier, by seeing younger patients with disabilities and even, believe it or not, cancer at such a young age. And so here are the 6 rules. I'll repeat them many times, so don't worry about memorizing them or committing them to memory. And all of this content will be shared with the community, inshallah, so it'll be available to watch the video again, and I think the slides might be made available too, and I'll show you a link to my own Instagram page, and this is all going to be on there too. So the 6 rules, I'm just going to read them off to you. So rule number 1, not all calories are created equal. That alludes to your question about how to quantify the effect of a food on a person's weight. It starts with calories, and as I'll show you, calories are not created equally at all. Rule number 2 is to trust the process, except when it comes to food. We're going to talk about what processed foods are and why we should avoid them, because it's scary. It's like a trap how easy it is to get our hands on processed foods and what it can do to our bodies that we don't even recognize. Rule number 3 was, to your point, everyone needs to know about insulin. I think when a lot of people hear the word insulin, they might think of diabetes because diabetic patients are on insulin very often. But insulin and understanding what happens with our bodies when we eat food and how that relates to the insulin levels and what that's doing with our liver and with our fat tissue is extremely important. And I'll talk about how fasting plays into that, because the whole basis from a health standpoint of fasting has to do with insulin resistance, which some might have heard of here, and insulin sensitivity and that balance. Rule number 4 alludes to mindfulness. It's only if you really want it. And I'll explain what that means when we get there, but it's about applying mindfulness to any and every situation when food is in front of us and we need to navigate it. Rule number 5 is a play on words. It's live to see another day instead of live to see another day. And it's about the importance of strength training. And then rule number 6 is to run or walk for your life. So rule number 1, all calories are not created equal. So I think you had mentioned a formula, and a lot of people start with this formula: calories in minus calories out equals a calorie deficit. But the real equation is nothing like that. In our bodies, it's not addition, subtraction. It's actually calculus. It's literally, this is a calculus equation. I used to know what this meant at some point. I don't know what it means anymore, but it's actually more complicated than that in our bodies. So even if this looks complicated, forget about it. I mean, the calories thing, it's very, very different from that. And the reason for that is in part because of how calories are determined. And when you, if someone here knows, you can share it. Otherwise, I have a video that I'll show you in the talk about how calories are determined in a given food. And I would ask, all of us here, does it accurately reflect what happens in our bodies? And you don't need to be a physician to know once you see the video that no, absolutely not. There is no furnace inside of our body burning Cheetos on fire. So I'll play the video in a second. So the point I'm making here is that calories are a starting point. You should know how many calories, more or less, are in your food. You should know, based on your height and your weight and your activity level, roughly how many calories our bodies burn on their own. But if you sit down and expect it to work, if you just add some calories and subtract some calories and then throw your hands up and say, oh, why am I not losing weight? That's not going to work. It's not going to work like that. Yeah. So let me show you, actually. It's a great question. So this video, it's crazy. This is literally how they determine it. So let's see if it works. It says media unavailable. Yeah, if you're on Wi-Fi, maybe.
Do you know where's the link to YouTube or something?
Yeah. How about this? After the talk, I can pull it up?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me try it one more time. We can just see. If I preview it, let's see. Nope. Well, because I cut the video out, but I'll find it. I know where to find it. Yeah. So I will tell you though. This is I'll find the video for you. But what this guy is going to do is he's trying to calculate the amount of calories in Cheetos, which is the cheese chips, like the snack. And so he takes it and he lights it on fire. And he has water in a beaker, and he measures the temperature change in the water and the amount of energy that it requires to raise the temperature of the water by 1 degree Celsius. That is what is defined as a calorie. So it's a good starting point to tell how much energy is in a food, but it is absolutely not what's happening in our bodies. And so, as you said, nutrition labels might show that a slice of bread has 70 calories, but the same bread might be completely white bread and very easy for our bodies to burn through, or it could be 100% whole wheat bread full of fiber that requires our bodies to work very hard to burn through. And so there's a big difference between the two. And so this is not what happens in our bodies at all. There is no beaker, there's no guy lighting Cheetos on fire. Our bodies are breaking down nutrients into their fundamental forms, whether it's proteins, fats, or carbs, and handling them in very, very different ways. And so when you see, 300 calories on something, just remember that it's a starting point. Does not tell you the whole story. And so here Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal, and that it's neither here nor there, but all calories are definitely not created equal. And so that's what you need to remember. When you're thinking about calories, don't assume that just because you're eating under a certain number of calories, you're going to lose weight. It does not work that way. And so a best practice, again, I'm going to restate, is to generally understand how many calories our bodies need to maintain the weight that we're at now, and then undershoot that number by 300 to 500 per day. But do not obsessively count or track calories. It's not going to work, and you'll find yourself, just like I did, doing a lot of math and very frustrated, and both of those things are bad. And so actually I did link here a calculator, and again, this will be available for everyone to use, but this was developed by an MD and a PhD. I think it's a very good calculator, and I entered my numbers here, 5'9", at the time I was 155, I'm still 31, and I put 1 to 2 times a week because these things really overestimate how much exercise we can do. One of my friends was wearing an Apple Watch, we were throwing a Frisbee around, and it said that he burned 1,600 calories, which is a humongous number of calories for doing practically nothing. I know because I was there, we were just throwing a Frisbee around. And so you should undershoot the amount of exercise that you actually do. And so for me, it came up with this number, 2,300 per day. And so like I said, you undershoot it by about 300 to 500. So for me, that comes out to, if you have a calculator on you, between 1,800 to 2,000 calories a day. And so that's where I start. But again, I don't sit there and count or try to get to 1,800. I use that just as a starting point, so when I look at nutrition labels, I can get a sense of, relative to my budget for the day, is this a good choice or not? So rule number 2 is to trust the process, except when it comes to food. And so both parts of the rule are important. So trust the process means what it sounds like. It will take time. In the image I showed you of the before and after, those were 2 years apart almost. And while I have noted a lot of change and I feel a lot better now than I did then, it took a long time, and it's not going to happen overnight. From 1 week to the next, you're not going to feel all that different. The number on the scale probably won't be all that different, and that's okay. But if you stick to it and keep on applying the rules, 100% guarantee that it's going to turn out the right way for you. So to trust the process, except when it comes to food. So first of all, before I go into it, does anyone here want to take a guess at what a processed food actually is? The answer is on the slide, so if you need help, it's on there. Like fiber? Yeah. Yes. Good question. So yeah, first I'll say both parts of what you just said. So first, you are correct. Processed foods, half of processed foods are foods from which something was taken away from the natural state of the food. So if you think about it, there is no such thing as white rice or white flour growing in nature. That doesn't exist. Anywhere you go in the world, you won't find it. All grains have 3 parts, bran, germ, and endosperm. Those are the 3 parts. And white rice, white bread are stripped of the first 2. So only the inner layer is there. And the reason for this is what you alluded to. It prolongs the shelf life, and it tastes a little bit nicer, I guess, or a little bit easier, but really it's just because we're used to it. But the intention is to make the company more money. It's literally so that the food will last a lot longer because it's not in its natural state, and it can sit on the shelf for much longer before mold or things grow on it. Because imagine, I mean, the bacteria, they want the nutrition. They don't want to eat processed food. We eat processed food, but it's not good enough for the bacteria or the mold usually. Your second point was about like kind of how they determine those dates and does the quality of the food change over time. I can tell you that I don't have the exact answer to that question. What I can tell you is that general advice is that if a food is within its sort of best buy or expiration date, you can safely eat it. If a food has clearly gone bad or clearly molded or looks spoiled, I wouldn't eat it. And to my knowledge, because there is no active digestion going on, as long as you're within the safety period of when a food can be eaten, its nutritional value should not change much. So to use an example, let's say you had whole wheat bread just sitting on your countertop, and it's going to go bad next week, we'll say February 5th. On February 4th, there's no reason to think that the nutritional content of the food is completely gone and you should throw it away or not eat it. Because if you think about it, the way our bodies work in digesting the food, none of that is happening to the food itself. It's just sitting there. But I definitely think that we should try to avoid visibly spoiled food or things like that. And my wife can tell you, my mom can tell you, I'm very paranoid about food. Like I throw things away probably a little bit too early. But yeah, I mean, I think that as long as it's safe, I don't think you should worry about the change in the nutritional content that much because nothing has happened to it to prevent it from being nutritious. And so I said that was half of processed foods, right? Was subtraction. The other part is addition, actually. So processed foods are when things are added to the food, right? So an easy example of this would be peanut butter. So if you look at literally what peanut butter is, if you put peanuts in a grinder and you ground them, the butter that comes out is peanut butter. That's it. That's all that should be in it. But when you add things like sunflower oil, sugars, which if you go to the grocery store, compare them next time you go, side by side, you'll see that there is processed peanut butter, which has ingredients that I can't even pronounce, and then regular peanut butter, where the only ingredients is dry roasted peanuts. There's a huge difference between what that does to your body and the quality of both of those foods, although the processed one is going to last longer on your shelf. But again, who does that benefit? Does that benefit us, or does that benefit, Skippy or Jif or the peanut butter companies? So, sort of one alternative or one way of navigating this that I would suggest is swapping white rice or white bread or naan or pita or whatever we eat with 100% whole wheat alternatives. The difference, as you alluded to, is huge on your body, and I'm going to get into this for rule number 3. But the way that it causes your sugar to spike and the way that your insulin releases in response to this is very, very different. And so it's unnatural. Our bodies aren't even meant to handle that kind of a load of sugar or carbohydrates without fiber, without hydration, and with all these other chemicals. And added sugars are really scary. They're bad for you. And if you look at the daily limit on added sugar from the American Heart Association, it's pretty crazy. For men, it's 36 grams, which is 6 or so teaspoons. For women, it's 24, which is about 4. And one can of Coke, just like one regular Coke, has about 40 or 50. So that's it. If you drink a can of Coke, you're done for 2 days with added sugar. And then when you eat white bread, or white roti at the wedding, which has more added sugar, it adds up very quickly, and we don't even know it. And so it's not for us. It's to protect the companies and to increase the profits, and that's not what. They don't have our best interests in mind. And so this whole thing about whole grain and whole wheat, it's so important that I want to comment on it specifically. All it means is those 3 parts of the grain are intact. And what you should look for in the store, because it's confusing, they do it on purpose. If it says whole wheat or whole grain or honey wheat or these words that sound very healthy, but the number 100% is not there, it's not good enough. And so for people here who have kids, it's like the kids' report card. It could be 95, 92, it's not good enough. it has to be 100, because I know that probably everyone here is the same way. Has to say 100% whole wheat. That's how you know that all of the grain that's used in that product is untouched. So you're not allowed to write 100% unless all of the flour, all of the grain that's used is in its natural form. And so it's pretty simple. Just look for the number 100. And like I said, they add a lot of these chemicals, and I put them here because I'm not going to read them because I'm probably going to mispronounce them, but the idea is that our bodies aren't meant to handle these. They trigger inflammation, they're harmful, and as I showed you earlier, they're linked to certain cancers when they're taken in excess, especially aspartame, which if you guys are keeping up, the WHO a couple months ago actually listed aspartame as one of the things that could be a carcinogen, and that was an artificial sweetener used for a very long time. This is the process. I don't know if there's any basketball fans, but Joel Embiid, he is famous for having said, trust the process. That's when the Philadelphia 76ers, they weren't a very good basketball team. He was asked about the team, and he said, no, just trust the process. And right now, they're one of the best teams in the league. And so, maybe if you're a basketball fan, just remember what he said. Trust the process, except when it comes to food. Don't eat processed food. This is also a really good website. Again, don't worry about memorizing it. The presentation is going to be there. You had a question? Oh, okay. How much time do we have? 5-10 minutes. Oh, okay. Well, maybe 15 minutes. All right. So, okay, then we'll run through this quickly, yeah? But this is a good website. It's called Fooducate. Again, this is available for you. You can enter any food. So I entered like a Fairlife chocolate protein shake. Looks very healthy. They have all these nice like cows on it and stuff. It looks like it should be healthy. But they gave it a grade of a C. That's way less than the 100% that I just mentioned, right? Why is that? It actually goes into all of the ingredients on that complicated ingredient list so that you don't have to do that. And it'll tell you, hey, it's highly processed. There are foods to add to your vocabulary. It's there to increase the shelf life. It goes into a lot of detail. And so if you're ever curious about a food, use this website. It's free. You don't need to give your email. And at the grocery store, real quick, you can just punch it in and see. So this is rule 3. Everyone needs to know this rule. So if I can only say one thing during this talk, this is the most important thing. Everyone needs to know about insulin. And so this looks like a lot of words, but don't worry, I have pictures and I'm going to break it down for everybody so you'll get a chance to really internalize this. Our body releases a hormone called insulin whenever we eat any meal containing carbohydrates. And so carbohydrates, they're not good or bad, they just are. They're just a chemical just like anything else. And they're a breakdown product just like when you eat, proteins or fats. When we eat carbohydrates, our bodies release a hormone or a chemical signal called insulin. And insulin's job is to store those carbohydrates in a form that we can use them for later on. So when we eat something with carbs, our blood sugar goes up, insulin is released, and it brings it back down by storing that sugar in 3 places: in the liver, in the muscle, and whatever's left, in fat. And if your body can't store in your liver or in your muscle, your body will create new fat cells. So that's how people get fat, is by eating excess amounts of carbohydrates that their bodies can't store and that their insulin cannot accommodate easily. Just like anything else over time, addiction actually, believe it or not, works exactly the same way. People who have addictions need more and more of the drug just to get the same effect, and they eventually start to go through withdrawals. When our body gets used to secreting so much insulin again and again over time, our body needs more carbohydrates just to achieve the same effect, and our body needs to release more insulin just to handle that. That's why a diabetic person has high blood sugar, is because the insulin that their body is trying to secrete, the body is resistant to it. It needs more and more to achieve the same effect. And that's why diabetic patients are oftentimes prescribed insulin, because their body can't make enough and because they're resistant to it. The problem is that insulin inhibits or prevents the activity of a hormone called hormone-sensitive lipase. Don't worry about memorizing the name. But hormone-sensitive lipase does kind of the opposite thing as insulin. When our body needs to break down the fat stores to get the fat out and literally burn fat, insulin doesn't let it do that, because insulin is there to try to store and hold on to carbohydrates, put it in the liver, the muscle, and the fat. So insulin prevents your body, literally prevents your body from burning fat. And when you can't burn your fat, your reserve energy, you'll feel tired, you'll feel weak, and the only thing you can do about it is eat a little bit more. And so you feel tired and you feel hungry because of your insulin resistance, because of the amount of insulin in your system, and because of the fact that it's not letting you burn your stores. And so when we eat, we need to think conceptually about what is happening with our insulin levels. And obviously there's no test, there's nothing on your phone or your watch you can look at, but if you understand this conceptually, it'll be really easy to eat and drink in such a way that you maneuver and navigate this. And so here, this is a picture representation of exactly the thing I just said, right? So when you eat a meal with glucose, right, sugar, your insulin will go up. It says right here very clearly that it gets stored in the muscle, the fat, and the liver. Fat burning goes down. Fat formation goes up. And the conversion of extra sugar into fat goes up. As you can see here, this picture that says, how does insulin work? All insulin does is it goes onto cells and allows glucose, which is that carbohydrate breakdown product, to go into the aforementioned cells in the muscle, the liver, and the fat. And so when your insulin levels are high, because you're eating a high glucose meal, you literally cannot burn fat. It's not possible. And so the only way to feel energetic is to eat more, and you'll eat more sugary foods. You'll kind of go into this vicious cycle that never ends. And so you asked a question earlier about fasting, right? When we fast, obviously we're not eating. Our glucose level is low. Our insulin level is low. And this hormone, remember I said hormone-sensitive lipase, gets to burn the fat stores that we already have. We keep fat so that we could use it when we're not eating something and our bodies, don't shut down. And our brains actually prefer the breakdown products from here to just sugar, believe it or not. And so insulin prevents this from happening. And what turns out is that, you can't do this. And so for me, a lot of what I did in terms of my diet is, instead of getting confused about what foods that I should eat or what's the best, sometimes I just would kind of fast in a way. I mean, I would just take a meal off, or I would just wait a longer time to eat breakfast, because I knew this was happening. Literally in my fat cells, I knew that I was allowing this hormone-sensitive lipase, this HSL, to burn fats. My body would get to use those fats. I would be just fine, even if I felt a little hungry, that was a good sign. And that was it. That was really all there was to it. And so insulin is the key to this whole talk, the key to this whole presentation. And so even if you're not a patient with diabetes or directly taking care of someone, you need to be familiar with insulin. You need to understand that foods with high sort of amount of carbohydrates, especially without fiber or without water accompanying them, will spike your insulin levels and cause that whole cascade waterfall effect of basically tolerance, of being unable to burn fat, and really get us in the opposite direction of where we want to go. And then this is the last picture regarding insulin. People here might have heard of the glycemic index. So high means that it's a food that when you eat it, it triggers that glucose and insulin response more. Low is a food where when you eat it, it doesn't really spike the insulin and the blood sugar level as much. And so low is what we should aim for. So a banana, 52, that's pretty low. Whole wheat bread, 64, not bad. White rice, which all of us eat on a very regular basis, 92. That's more than a donut, which is 86. So when you're eating white rice or white bread, we're basically eating a donut. That's what our body is receiving or feeling when we're eating these foods. And so again, it's very, very important to think about that and consider high fiber alternatives, which is those 100% whole wheat breads, whole wheat naan, whole wheat pita, quinoa or brown rice instead of white rice, things like that. And so how do we prevent insulin resistance? We eat foods like these whole wheat ones that are high in fiber, We eat foods that are high in protein that barely spikes your insulin. And you eat foods that are very rich in fiber, as I mentioned, and water. In nature, if you think about any crop or any plant, there is no carbohydrate. No one here can tell me of a carbohydrate that does not come with fiber and water that naturally occurs in nature. It's processed foods that remove them and make them more palatable or delicious. But there is no white rice. There's no donuts growing, in the fields of Texas. It doesn't work that way. And then some people might think of like a mango, for example. Oh, it's high in sugar. The glycemic index is only 60. And that's because it's full of water, it's full of fiber, and so you can actually eat it without suffering the same consequences as a bowl of white rice, believe it or not. And so I'll go through these last rules quickly because they're a little bit more intuitive. Rule number 4 is only if you want it. And so I have a link here to an article by Yaqeen Institute, if some of you have heard of it. It's a really good website, and it has this article that I read a long time ago about how to be a mindful Muslim that I liked a lot. Mindfulness is, to put it simply, an awareness of your own thoughts, an awareness of your internal state, and being able to an extent, control it and respond to it. I think that mindfulness is really important in terms of being fit and in being healthy. There's going to be all sorts of situations like weddings, parties, work events, where there will be a donut, there will be a slice of pizza, and if you're like me, you might feel a little bit strange. I mean, it's hard to say no to a couple of chips or a Kit Kat, and you don't actually have to 100% avoid these foods, right? I mean, I'll be honest with you guys, before I came here, for lunch I had a burger today. So, I mean, just full disclosure, it happens sometimes, right? You will eat foods that, you aren't the best, or it happens. But the idea is that you should check yourself and be mindful and think about whether you actually want that food or whether it's just there for you and you're in the habit of consuming it. You should think about how to establish a well-informed and healthy relationship with food so that when you see a food, you don't have an emotional response of, oh, well, I have to eat it, it's right there, or, oh, but my family loves chips, if I don't eat chips, I'm not part of my family. All sorts of weird thoughts. This is from personal experience, right? So all sorts of weird things, and food is not an inherently emotional thing. It brings us together, it's cultural, it's a source of connection, but we should always think about whether we really want to eat that piece of chocolate, whether we were really craving that cookie and it would make us happy, or whether it was just anxiety and being sort of habituated to something that made us just reach for it without thinking about it and without even enjoying it. And so there's a big difference between really wanting something and it making you happy and craving it and being anxious about it. Rule number 5, we're almost done, is lift to see another day. It's the importance of strength training. So like I said earlier, actually building muscle allows you to store more glucose and therefore improve your insulin sensitivity. And so strength training literally can prevent and treat diabetes. Muscle is also what enables mobility. So standing or getting up from a chair or doing sajda or sujood when you're praying, all of these things require skeletal muscle. It's what enables mobility. Weightlifting also increases bone density, which can prevent fractures, and women who are past the age of menopause are actually at higher risk of fractures due to menopause. And so weightlifting can counteract that. Don't worry, you're not going to become Arnold Schwarzenegger. People have been trying their whole life and they don't look anything like him. And so if you go to the gym once or twice, you'll look fine. You'll look very good. And strength training is not just heavy barbells and plates. You can use bands, resistance bands online, kettlebells that are very light and ergonomic for you to hold, very light weights, and even just a weighted vest. All of these things count. And I've linked here a lot of studies and articles that go into how literally lifting weights prevents death from a variety of causes, and how people who do strength training not only live longer, but they live healthier lives. Rule number 6, the final rule: run or walk for your life. So cardiovascular training. So for this, I would say, just a disclaimer, don't worry about target heart rates, Apple Watches, counting calories. Like I talked about earlier, those things don't actually matter as much as we think they do. Just keep it simple. I'll show you the American Heart Association guidelines. If you went for a 40-minute walk 3 days a week and you lifted very light weights for 40 minutes twice a week, you would be in like the 95th percentile for exercise. That's all you have to do. It's very, very little. It's very easy. And as you see here in this photograph, I'll show you the next one here. Brisk walking, moderate intensity is 2.5 miles an hour. So for those of us who might have been late to Jummah today, you are walking much faster than 2.5 miles an hour from the parking lot. So just remember that speed, that's probably 3 or 4 miles an hour. So walk slower than that for 40 minutes a day, a couple times a week, you'll be fine. And the rest of these, in the interest of time, I won't read through, but please do go through this at your leisure. The point I'm making is that just going for a walk around your neighborhood a few times a week can literally prevent disease and give you a longer, more fulfilling, healthful life. And so again, just to recap, we're concluding the 6 rules. Not all calories are created equal. Trust the process, except when it comes to food. Everyone needs to know about insulin. Only if you really want it, so mindfulness. Lift to see another day, so strength training, and run or walk for your life, which is cardiovascular training. If you can apply these rules, you can stop obsessing over counting calories. You can stop trying to eat unusual foods that are diet foods, full of preservatives and unnatural ingredients. And you can stop trying to worry about the best workout and just get out there, have fun, and keep it simple. And so then, this is just results and progress. As you can see, this photo is me on the left, and then the one just to the right of it, is wearing kind of the same thing, and alhamdulillah, I look and feel much better. And then same thing here, same idea. Just by applying these rules, 2 years, I was able to come this far, alhamdulillah, and I think everybody here can do even better than this. And so, for the next talk, I'll go through this really quick. I'll have sample meals so I can show you guys examples of meals where we apply these 6 rules. I'll teach how to read a nutrition label. We'll talk about specific considerations for women's health, such as menopause, pregnancy, specific workouts rooted in biomechanics, cancer prevention, how fasting works in more detail, and injury recovery, which I have personal experience with. So thanks for listening and telling everybody.
Any questions, inshallah, for Dr. Cyrus? Yes.
Jazakallah khair. Cyrus, I think you will be soon kicked out of the medicine or doctor community. They're going to say you are reducing your patients. I don't think if it's going to happen like what happened to Dr. Green from Virginia. He was in MD and then he went into the natural. But Jazakallah khair for this one. So my couple of questions are regarding the first question is, I'm going to start with the number 7. I like 7, and that's why I'm going to say, I suggest maybe add 7 in this sense, because when I tried to lose weight, I found it more effective when I grouped with few people. I made a competition with them, and I said, okay, let's try to lose a weight, put a date on it, and then sort of tried it as a project. And I found it more effective. I was able to lose weight being part of that group because everybody was competing with each other. So I would say maybe that's your number 7 in future. Just a recommendation.
It's a great point, yeah.
So,
right. Very good, yeah.
Because
rule number 7.
Rule number 7,
Yeah.
because it's also help you psychologically. You are part of a group who is working for. So it has both medicinal as well as psychological benefits to it. The other question for your first slide, if you can go back to first and second slide, that would be great.
The first slide or the first rule?
The first rule, sorry.
Okay. Well, okay, this is the first rule.
So here means when you are saying about the calories, and you had a calculator there, was that calculation based on sort of what kind of lifestyle you have? You have like just sitting down or a little bit activity or high moderate activity in a life? That would be helpful in future series when you are recommending. That would be a good idea for everyone to see. Oh, I just sit on the computer, don't do any physical activity. These calories may be even lower than.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, and if you change this part right here, you can change it to say sedentary. Right. You could change it to say a workout 6 or 7 times a week. Just be cautious that it way overestimates the amount of calories you burn.
Great. So. And maybe since in future you're gonna mention, if you can also say what's the benefit of natural or organic food.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a good one. Thank you.
Any other questions, brothers and sisters?
I think there is one on this. Oh, okay.
Jazakallah khair for the presentation. You talked about banana having a low whatever index, glycemic and all
Glycemic
that.
index, yep.
So is it safe for someone like myself with diabetes, where I like my nightly routine before sleep, I like to have a banana with cereal and milk and a little bit of a dash of honey?
Well, so actually out of all of that, what I would just give off the record counsel, because I don't have your medication list or A1C, so I would say as a disclaimer, talk to your doctor first. But out of everything you just mentioned, the banana itself would have a relatively lower glycemic index, so that in and of itself is fine. And there are I've read about this exact question. Bananas are safe for diabetic patients, provided that they're not uncontrolled and, really in a messy situation. But I would say that honey, be a little cautious about, because honey and syrup, they're delicious, but you should think of them as added sugars. That's how the nutritional guidelines navigate them. And so if you're eating an amount of honey that, say, has 20 grams of added sugar, you're getting pretty close to your daily limit for somebody without diabetes. And so honey is a great food, it's sunnah, but be mindful of the amount. I would actually measure it out. From what you said to me, the honey stood out more than the banana did.
Do we have a question here?
Can we combine high-intensity workout with resistance and cardio?
Yeah, you definitely can. I mean, you can actually do it in such a way that you take shorter time intervals between your sets. And so let's say you were doing like a chest and back workout. If you do a set for chest, instead of waiting 2 or 3 minutes, you could do a circuit with a back workout right after that, and then take a short, 1 minute rest and go back into it. That would be, if you're like busy and you're trying to get everything done at once, that's cardio and weightlifting at the same time. And they've studied HIIT training compared to standard interval weight training, and you get the cardiovascular benefits the way you said. It's just harder, so for everyone it might not be as easy to do.
So I have a question or a comment. So basically what to take from this presentation is to not make it more complicated than it really needs to be, and stay as close to the real, biological needs, like eat as much as you need and stay active and be mindful, so we are not like chasing a target. And one of the brothers had mentioned about a tribe, like a bunch of people should do it together. I think the best tribe to include is family. Because I think sometimes what happens is like the guys can get together and go out for walks, and the women and the kids can like be home. So it's a good thing to include that.
The women are chasing the children, they're burning the calories.
Yeah.
That's a great point you make, because last year, me and my wife, because I couldn't find a group, and she couldn't find a group of her friends, and we had a competition, and we put our money on it,
Nice.
and she lost more than me.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it.
She lost more weight, but she got more money, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? 'Cause, yeah.
She got both.
Yeah, good.
She was very motivated.
Yeah.
I think she's smart.
So, Dr. Cyrus, again, I will finish with my comment. Jazakallah khair for such beautiful presentation. It's really, I feel every single word you said. I lived all my life with weight challenges. Maybe it's due to family genetics, mainly. But again, I have some other things like stress eating. When I'm stressed, just like I grab anything sugary, it makes me really feel happy, and I can attest to that. Eating sugar makes you feel happy. I will share some funny story with everybody here. I was on a diet for 3-4 months, not eating a single sugar. I was healthy, everything, and then I was in a survey with T-Mobile, and then the technicians decided to stop by one of those famous chocolate stores. And they served us a sample for free, chocolate milk, super condensed sugar. I remember I drank half cup and I started laughing. I don't know why I'm laughing.
Yeah.
I'm happy. And I told my wife, really, if they made me sign any check today, I would have signed it. So I understand that. Also, I got your point really when you said when you feel healthy, you have confidence, and your emotions and are well under control. And if you are on the other side, actually feel depressed. I pass with all these things. The person standing in front of you tried all type of diets, Weight Watcher, all type of things you can see on the Walmart shelves, chemical, calorie chemical, all these things. I'm that close to go for a surgery. I'm that close. I'm thinking seriously to go for this surgery. It's just my wife is standing in the middle because I have to stop that. And really with that, I'm urging and asking, what is the next step after that? We need to take this one step further after. I personally knew all these things from trial and failure and error and all these things. But the problem is, I lose weight, I diet, I lose weight, I stop, I gain back. I diet, I lose weight, I stop. This ping pong, I'm talking about years and years. I did not reach that point of once and for good. So what's your advice and what's the next step from this presentation? Inshallah, with this, that will conclude, inshallah.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. No. Yeah, sure. So I have right now, I have an Instagram page. If you're on Instagram, and my link was in the PowerPoint, but I think it was removed or something. But I'll show you where it is online in a moment.
And by the way, the brother Atif said, if you need the presentation, are you the one who sent that?
Yes.
Huh?
I've circulated some papers. Just email
Admin.
Salam.
Okay, if you want the presentation today, the slides, because the video and the recording, you will find it on the Facebook and the YouTube forever, inshallah. But if you need the slides, send an email to admin.salam@isgh.org, admin.salam@isgh.org, and ask them for the presentation. Inshallah, they will send it to you. So can you conclude quick, inshallah, because we have to close the facility.
Sure, so let me answer your question.
I have a quick question or a
So you
comment.
can pass it around.
Yeah.
Sure.
I have personal experience with this, and then I'm kind of
Yes.
sedentary since August. I found that by changing my diet, changing the food I was eating, I found myself in a position where I was diagnosed as being profoundly anemic. My hemoglobin was only 7. This is a problem. So I went to mayoclinic.com, as we do, and I asked specifically, what foods can I eat to increase my iron naturally? And I adopted those foods, only those foods. I went with, before iron infusions, I personally, changing my diet, took my hemoglobin from a 7 to a 12.
Wow, mashallah, that's great. Yeah.
Indian food. I'm not kidding. And everything I was eating had to be microwaved because where I was staying, Saffron Road.
Those little frozen ones, yeah, those aren't bad actually, yeah. Yeah.
Not expensive. They're chicken tikka masala.
It's good stuff. Yeah, I've tried it. Yeah, yeah.
The butter chicken, not so much. But I started eating sod and chicken tikka masala because it had a lot of turmeric in it, and coriander, and cumin, dried apricots. Don't laugh at this, pitted prunes, and my very favorite part of what they said, dark chocolate. And dark chocolate does not have to be bitter. Dark chocolate can come with a coconut center called a Mounds Bar, or a refreshing mint center called your peppermint patch. But dark chocolate and cardamom tea and chai. But I went from what I had been eating, and not at my choice, to just eating that.
That's amazing, yeah.
And I will tell you that if you find yourself in a hospital and in rehab centers for 3 months, the food they feed you in the hospital will take that 12 you got yourself to and drop it to a 6 in
Well, that's great, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, yeah. So, should I answer your question, Brother Morsi? Do we have time, or? Okay, so I can do it in less than a minute. So I would say the next step for you is to apply rule number 4, reflect, be mindful about what you're eating and what you just said, right? This isn't about ping and pong. This isn't a temporary diet. These are rules that are simple and sustainable enough that you could follow them for 6, 7, 8 years and you won't feel like you're doing anything. So a little bit of planning and reflection about what refined foods am I eating, what processed foods am I eating. Can I wake up 30 minutes earlier and go for a walk or lift some light weights? Do that reflection. That's the next step. And if you can apply those things and apply these 6 rules, I don't think it's a self-limited temporary diet anymore. I think it's just a new normal and a new way of life.
So if you would start with 2 clients, we already have 2.
Well, yeah.
Jazakallah khair
Love it,
with
yeah.
that. Yeah, Jazakallah. Yes.
We're talking about the sugar. Now,
Yeah.